Oh yeah, it's time for the spookiest time of the year, Boo-vember. And honestly, I'm very sorry this came out a little later than usual, but this is the favorite time of the year for me, mainly because I get to talk about one of my favorite franchises of all time. It was a real exercise to get all this together, and honestly, under 2 hours, but it's time to indulge in some frightful delights, and thanks to Shudder for keeping one of the best anthology horror series going this long, and honestly, keeping the quality this high. As usual, I know you've got your own ranking list, and I would love to hear about them in the comments below. Absolutely put them down there. But this time, it's going to be real tough with the last few entries because I'm including all of the wraparound segments. That's right, I'm going through over 40 different segments this year. In fact, we're taking all 43 segments across 8 features, and we're ready to rank them from bottom to top. I've really been loving doing this over the years, but I really importantly love adding this criteria to it. I've been using this for the last few VHS reviews, which you can watch in the description below, obviously. So let's start with how we rate each single segment, and what is the criteria for how great they are. Criterion 1, spooks. How scary is it? Does it make me scared of my own shadow in every single dark corner of my house, or is it something I can just roll my eyes at? Criterion 2, creativity. How much fun are the directors, writers, and producers having? What do they bring to the table that's fully original? And what do I absolutely love about them? Criterion 3, authenticity. Does it fit the era it's set in? Are we looking at something found at the bottom of a dumpster, or is this something that has too much time on their hands and too many After Effects extensions? And finally, criterion 4, execution. Does this reach my expectations or dash them against the rocks of mediocrity? Do they give it their all, or are they simply just phoning it in? And now with all of that out of the way, let's start with the worst segment and go all the way to the top. Number 43, Vicious Circles from VHS Viral. Written by T.J. Sinfel, David White, and Marcel Sarmiento, and directed by Marcel Sarmiento. God damn, Vicious Circles sucks just as much as VHS Viral does. Honestly, it makes you truly feel that it's all uphill from here. The premise is so simple. Guy has girlfriend, shit goes weird, girlfriend goes missing, phones make people insane, ice cream truck is causing the phone problems and is ruining Los Angeles, yada yada yada. Guy gets stuck in dog's head. It's too much and too little all at the same time. The effects are middling and honestly something I could probably do in a weekend. And there's no real escalation. The setup is way too cliche and honestly takes way too long to get together. The acting overall is mediocre, and I hate all these overlay effects, and this weird interlude at the party feels honestly kind of a bit racist, if also out of nowhere. Like, this could have been a segment all on its own, but it just kind of really feels shoehorned in there for no reason. And honestly, the footage is way too clean. It almost feels like it was shot on the most expensive 4K camera they had at the time. Also, you lose massive points from using music from A Clockwork Orange to represent that people are being brainwashed. The best I can say is that I like how it's shot, and if it wasn't a found footage movie, I'd say, honestly, the camera work and some of the moments that are the most interesting are the ones with the crowds here. Like, this is difficult to shoot and direct. But yeah, at the end of the day, Vicious Circles gets a 1 out of 10. Number 42, Fun Size from VHS Halloween, written and directed by Casper Kelly. I've already talked extensively about how much I didn't like Fun Size in my VHS Halloween review, and rewatching it again, my feelings honestly have not changed at all. It's a mediocre segment in an otherwise a very good VHS entry. It definitely fits the theme really well, I got no problem with that, but all the love being heaped on this is honestly disappointing and a great representation for how much mascot horror has taken over the landscape. For those unaware, it's a pretty standard setup. A group of trick-or-treaters go through hell because they take too much candy, because honestly that is an original sin. The short is just mediocre through and through, and it has the most trite observations in the very mediocre writing, especially about the found footage genre and horror, and also candy. Like, yeah, we get it. There's a dick vein on certain candy bars. That's not a super original take. The biggest disappointment is that I love Casper Kelly so much, and he's been doing amazing stuff in horror for over 20 years, except for Fun Size. Fun Size could have been a huge triumph, be amazing and just as good as the work that he's done with Cartoon Network and Adult Swim, but it's not funny, it's not self-aware, and it's not cutting edge. All of the things that I expect from the great Casper Kelly. Honestly, I really hope whatever he comes out with next is fantastic, because this didn't subvert any of my expectations and it just sucks. The only good thing I can say is that some of the practical effects are really, really great, and this final moment with the candy bowl is fun, but beyond that, Fun Size is overall just not fun and not worth the price of admission. Fun Size is a 1.5 out of 10. Number 41, Phase 1 Clinical Trials from VHS 2, written by Simon Barrett and directed by Adam Wingard. Another director-writer pairing that, frankly, I don't know how to feel about. I think Phase 1 Clinical Trials is a great, if unoriginal, premise with mixed execution and a very confusing middle and just overall terrible acting. While I think the camera work, editing, and direction is creative and fun at different points, Phase 1 has a lot of problems the way it honestly tries to make this feel believable, but then has these kind of moments where I just feel like it's okay at best and really, really cliche at worst. The idea of a recording camera implant has been done better in other later movies, but a haunted eye has been done better in the Peng Brothers' The Eye, and excluding the fact that it's a live recording camera, which kind of doesn't make any sense, like how's the battery work and stuff, there's really nothing super new here, except maybe the drowning scene. I like that, and obviously the ending with the swallowing eye. I think that's gory and horrible and creative and has such a terrible sinking feeling, both literally and figuratively. But I don't know, the POV is kind of interesting, but it's just confusing, especially how the editing works with some of the glitches, but by the middle point, who even cares? I've never really liked Phase 1, and I think I've mentioned previously that according to IMDb, the main actor was originally going to be played by AVGN himself, James Rolfe, but he was unavailable because he was working on his own AVGN movie, and honestly, knowing that every single time I watch this segment, it makes me so unhappy, because it may have robbed us of the best VHS segment in internet history. The most positive thing I can say is that some of the practical effects and editing are really good, like this little simple switch in the bed with the sheet and stuff. I think that's really great, but honestly, the glitches and sound design and the boom kind of stuff kind of ruins it for me. Like, also, where does the music come from in this sex scene? That's just confusing. Also, I have some like general problems with the fact I think this is probably Adam Wingard's house at the time, or one of his friends. There's also not that much information about our main character or why he has to get the eye. I kind of wish there was a line about that. Anyway, it's just a mess of a segment with a lot of problems. The jump scares, the weak acting, the writing, and honestly, a fairly simple ghost story make this even less and less fun as time goes on. Sadly, it's the worst segment in one of the best VHS films, and I give Phase 1 Clinical Trials a 1.5 out of 10. Number 40, Gorgeous Vortex from VHS Viral. Written and directed by Todd Lincoln. Writer-director Todd Lincoln's Gorgeous Vortex has been an outlier in the VHS franchise, mainly because it wasn't included in the original theatrical version of it. You had to get either the DVD or the Blu-ray, and while it feels more of like a music video or a concept trailer instead of a full segment, I still think it's okay. It's also crazy this is the last thing Todd Lincoln ever directed before he just disappeared off the face of the earth. Like, you check his IMDb and that's kind of weird in a way. Gorgeous Vortex is an incredible watch, but sadly it's such a weak segment and kind of makes me glad it was never properly featured in VHS Viral. I think at some point it was included in the original cut, which explains also the sub 80-minute runtime. Also, I think overall just kind of doesn't fit VHS. I think it has some interesting things to say about fame and obviously the predatory nature of Hollywood culture, but I think making it discarded from VHS Viral does make sense. I do wonder if it would have made VHS Viral a little bit more of a cohesive entry, but even then, I don't know where to put it in the film. Anyway, the segment is largely a disappointment because of the heavy-handed visual metaphors, a lack of character to follow, really, and it just feels more like a tone poem than an actual horror short. I give Gorgeous Vortex a 2 out of 10. Number 39, Bone Storm from VHS Viral. Written by Justin Benson and directed by Justin Benson and Aaron Moorhead. Look, maybe it's time, maybe it's age, maybe it's just chilling the fuck out as I get to 35 and learn to make my own shitty short films, but I didn't hate Bone Storm on this rewatch. Having read hundreds of comments and reviews over the last few years have made me realize that Bone Storm is far from the worst segment in the VHS franchise, but it's still not great, and maybe also a bit xenophobic, but I digress. It's almost punk rock looking at more recent entries with how dirty and gritty it is, but Bone Storm actually kind of feels like an artifact from the mid-2000s more than say Shredding does, which we'll get to at some point. If that's where it was set instead of the mid-2010s, I think it would have fared better, but I'm being more forgiving at the end of the day because Bone Storm has a great opening and middle section, but once they get into the ditch in Mexico, it just falls apart so quickly. The effect work is fun and the found footage style really fits the story and the characters, but I can't say anything more than that. The subtitles being added, the digital shakes, the piss yellow filter to let you know they're in Mexico, that part of it really, really sucks. And the ending I just don't care for. Bone Storm is still bad, but as you can see, there's a lot worse entries, and I think after all this time and seeing Justin Benson and Aaron Moorhead's more recent work, it's mainly made me feel like I can kind of give up on them as writer-directors. They can keep making stuff for Disney Plus and doing whatever they want to do, but I'm not going to be tuning in. I think Bone Storm was honestly the beginning of the end of their creative partnership with whatever they thought they were doing. And I give Bone Storm a 2 out of 10. Number 38. Shredding from VHS 99. Written and directed by Maggie Levin. Oh, what a surprise! Shredding is in here at such a low point. Shredding by Maggie Levin is such a disappointment. While not the worst entry in the franchise, I think it's possibly the worst part of VHS 99. And it sucks that, like Phase 1 clinical trials, it's right at the beginning of what is kind of an okay feature. I think the setup is cool and the execution is amazing with so many practical effects, but the acting and writing is so mediocre that it is literally distracting. Shredding in question feels so much like they're just poses. The Shredders are poses. There, I said it. Rather than being actual punks, I think the most telling thing is like the scene in the bedroom with how they act and stuff. It's honestly too tidy and too clean to be the bedroom of a punk. And I feel the same way about the editing and the footage itself. While some of the cuts and edits are disturbing in their own way, and yes, it's kind of cool, they're kind of adding in little bits and pieces of the undead band, I think it's just a sign that someone was honestly trying too hard to recreate what they think is punk rather than something actually awesome and interesting like this.
This punk CD has 36 tunes, man, and I'm telling you, they're all great.
Yeah.
Together we'll break these chains of love.
I'll make you wanna be, you don't understand.
My instrument.
While this might be more apt for VHS 94 with the collapse of punk rock after the death of grunge and Kurt Cobain, Shredding is just nothing great. But I do appreciate the actual punk rock band in there taking revenge. I think the Riot Girl stuff that they say, it's a little bit more Josie and the Pussycats than Bikini Kill, but I'm just glad that they take revenge on these ritual tryhards. I give Shredding a 3 out of 10. Number 37, Ozzy's Dungeon from VHS 99. Written and directed by Flying Lotus and Zoe Cooper. Another disappointing franchise entry from a beloved creative. Ozzy's Dungeon is a great, fun, and creepy premise that falls flat the more you think about it and what it could have been. It's sadly another disappointing entry in VHS 99, but I feel that's a bit expected after watching Shredding. Despite some great casting with Stephen Ogg, who gives an equally unhinged performance as his digital counterpart Trevor, there's not a lot going on here behind some great acting, great practical effects, and great production design. Another MVP in this short is Sonia Eddy, who sadly passed away in 2022, and I didn't even know. She gives so much in this role, and I'm so glad that she has an Emmy Award, even if it was posthumous, because it looks like she's having a lot of fun in giving this segment her all. I also appreciate every bit of production design in this segment. It's gross, and it's sweaty, and it's uncomfortable, but it's realistic for the time period. Even though I don't love it, ultimately, I think that's what Flying Lotus and Zoe Cooper wanted at the end of the day, was something that felt gross and felt like it was something more akin to a nightmare coming to life for them. The idea of a disturbing kids show isn't exactly original, but I like the idea of someone getting revenge on the creator after all of these years. I do think this one has aged a lot better with time, and I do love the opening and closing parts of this short, but beyond that, I think it honestly drags a lot in the middle, and I think while the acting keeps it buoyant and the dialogue and directing really is fun, it doesn't make up for a premise that runs out of steam too quickly. I do hope Flying Lotus keeps making music and directing, same thing with Zoe Cooper. This just wasn't my vibe, and I just wish it was better. And I give Ozzy's Dungeon a 3.5 out of 10. Number 36, Diet Phantasma from VHS Halloween. Written and directed by Brian M. Ferguson. Diet Phantasma is another wraparound entry in the series that I think it's interesting, but not amazing. It has nothing new to offer and is short on both scares and fun. I think the concept of, hey, a big mega corporation is making a delicious drink infused with evil spirits and they're experimenting on teens and kids is a great way to start your segment, but everything just kind of feels cliche and doesn't escalate to a great degree. Sure, it's got a lot of great practical effects, but beyond that, I don't think too much of it is memorable or fun. I've seen so much of this in other horror movies and analog shorts that I think that even comedy sketches have a better idea of how to escalate this kind of terrifying premise. The thing I really wanted out of Diet Phantasma was just something I'd never seen before, but I will say, I've never seen this before, and I appreciate it a whole bunch. It's honestly the peak of the entire segment. The only thing I can truly praise about this is the effects work and maybe one of the actors. And the final commercial is really fun. It just kind of gets the era accurately. But even then, I've seen both done before better, both in this series and elsewhere for, I'm assuming, a lower budget. I think the thing that annoys me the most is that the constant changing of accents and point of views, and the fact that, like, the lead guy, even though he's playing the character really well, there's no escalation. And honestly, the editing is just as obnoxious as he is as a character. I don't hate Diet Phantasma, I just think it could have been better, and that's what's truly disappointing. And I give Diet Phantasma a 3.5 out of 10. Number 35, Dante the Great from VHS Viral. Written and directed by Greg Bishop. Dante the Great truly represents the best and the worst of the VHS franchise all at once. While I don't think the segment nor the premise is original, I do like the spectacle and I do love the setup and the final takedown segment. The thing that truly lets me down with Dante the Great is the framing device and the amount of jumping from points of view and text on the screen. It just feels like they're trying too hard. It just doesn't help overall. It honestly just looks like a bad Fox pilot from like 2007 or 2008. Justin Wellborn does a fantastic job as Dante, both in his magician mode and just as a regular guy just trying to be himself. It's a depressing deep dive into the psyche of a magician, and I like that part of it, and seeing why they do what they do. Like, he's genuinely never a good dude and never happy with his lot in life, but you at least understand his motivations, and I think that comes across really well with Justin Wellborn's acting. It's a man so desperate for the spotlight that he literally kills for it. I also appreciate some of the effects work and creativity here. You use a lot of lighting that honestly helps hide some of the special effects, and even if the POV gets a bit confusing, I still get what is happening most of the time. I think ultimately, Dante the Great tells a story of someone who used the dark arts to try and do what he's always wanted to do, but at the end of the day, it's a Faustian bargain that ends with literally hundreds of dead, and honestly a lot of creative kills. But I can't put it higher on this list for how it betrays the found footage premise, and while it's fun, it's just a letdown at the end of the day. Dante the Great is just not that great, and kinda good. And I give Dante the Great a 3.5 out of 10. Number 34, Fur Babies from VHS Beyond. Written and directed by Christian and Justin Long. From the Brothers Long, Fur Babies is a really funny segment, but it's not funny enough to really stand out in something like VHS Beyond. I think the thing that I appreciate the most is the atmosphere and the acting, but it just seems confusing to put this in VHS Beyond. Not only because it doesn't really fit, there's no real sci-fi element. I would love to see a comedy horror shorts anthology, Shudder if you're listening, but I don't think it's that great at the end of the day. I do want to give a shout out to the MVP of the segment, who is Libby Letlow, who plays Becky. I cannot implore people to watch this segment just for her. Again, I don't really have to reiterate how the plot is relatively similar to the 2014 Justin Long vehicle Tusk, except we're swapping blubber for fur. But I think even as much as I don't love Tusk, I don't love Fur Babies either. I kind of hope that Justin was at least somewhat self-aware of this when he was putting this together with his brother, but looking at the tone and style of this, I think maybe the segment overall is amusing, but I just wish it was cheekier, dirtier, grosser maybe in a way. Beyond some minor gore and an interesting setup, Fur Babies does nothing for me, and I can only give them a 4 out of 10. Number 33. Holy Hell from VHS 94. Written and directed by Jennifer Reeder. Jennifer Reeder resets the franchise with a frantic SWAT raid styled sequence that becomes the framing device for VHS 94, and it might be the only negative part about that entry. As reality begins to fracture and the threat becomes a little less human and a little bit more psychological, you're primed for something even more fucked up, but it just ends up being, it's a cult and they're fine, whatever. I remember the first time I watched VHS 94, and I think that because it was the first new entry in a series that had been dormant for half a decade, I was kind of worried that they were actually going to keep going with the storyline that was in VHS Viral with the whole screens and stuff. Luckily, it's a bit better than that. In a weird way, it does something a bit more effective that, maybe smartphones are evil, rather than like, this is a cult and they're doing something fucked up. I also really don't like the generic music at the start of the segment, and I think the writing and the acting is kind of almost feels improvised. It does tie loosely into Terror, another segment in VHS 94, but it doesn't really escalate it beyond like, oh, it's the same guy. like the same guy who's in the white nationalist group is also technically a part of a SWAT team. I don't think that's too surprising in 2025. And look, I just wish it was like more fucked up. And I kind of don't have anything more to say about this than the production design's really good and the editing's kind of okay, but the footage honestly looks a little bit too clean for 1994. You can kind of tell that they just kind of put an overlay on it and kind of said, yeah, we're done. Holy Hell is at least short, and I think Jennifer Reeder and her team really does a great job to create a simple, straightforward wraparound segment to get people back into the franchise, and at least it doesn't overstay its welcome. Each interlude is less than 5 minutes, and that kind of makes me happy at the end of the day. So I only give Holy Hell a 4.5 out of 10. Number 32, Techno God from VHS 85, written by Zoe Cooper and directed by Natasha Kermani. I love so much of Techno God as a concept and how it's framed, but the unfortunate matter is that despite the world building and some of the more scarier, more terrifying moments, I still think that the segment is out of place in this VHS entry. I do appreciate the acting from Siobhan Michelle, who really carries this segment on her back, and honestly, the 3D effects work and the old guy like teaching how the virtual reality stuff works, I think is amazing and brilliant, but ultimately the writing and directing leave a lot to be desired, as well as the cutting between the 2 to 3 different cameras. I think that it's fine, but also I think that the audience should freak out more. It's kind of interesting because it does wonderfully parody, in a way, one-man shows and kind of what that scene looks like as someone who's attended a couple of them, but I think at the end of the day, it doesn't go far enough. I will say that the premise feels like if Lawnmower Man was written by Clive Barker instead of Stephen King, and that part I really like, but at the end of the day, I think Techno God is interesting, but not as scary or terrifying as it could be. And sadly, it's the worst entry in VHS 85, even if it's not that bad. So that means I can only give Techno God a 5 out of 10. Number 31, Stalk from VHS Beyond, written by Jordan Downey and Kevin Stewart, and directed by Jordan Downey. I'll be honest, Stalk has gotten better over the years, and I think it's just because I really like the director's style and the amount of work that went to the practical effects of this. The production design is really, really fun, and again, I don't think it's super original, and I don't think it should be in a found footage anthology, but once you get inside, it's down to one thing and one thing only for Warden. Let's kill them all. I think Warden as a concept is really interesting, and I think they could have done something really, really great with it, but I don't think it's done really well here. There's an SCP kind of vibe, like you kind of want to take down this kidnapping, murderous, cryptid thing that's taking babies and stuff, and I love that. The joke or the idea of like a stork taking babies rather than delivering them, I think that's great. The problem is that I don't think it's good for the found footage anthology. I think the writing, directing, and acting are mediocre at best, and I think the execution is pretty bad for the first few minutes, but once we get into the home, I like it. It's very Sam Raimi. It's very Evil Dead. I have no problem with the fighting and the throwing and the killing and the chainsaw and stuff. Like, that's super fun. That kind of spectacle I love. And I just feel like if you wanted to make it found footage, I mean, just look at the subject and the way that they did stuff. I think that Timo Tianto could teach you a few things. Like, at the end of the day, I don't really hate Stalk as much as I harped on about it in my original VHS Beyond review, but it really does feel like it's the worst segment in VHS Beyond, which is a shame considering how good that entry is in the franchise. So sadly, I can only give Stalk a 5 out of 10. Number 30, Utsupra Sikinfra from VHS Halloween, written by Paco Plaza and Alberto Marini, and directed by Paco Plaza. I know this is one of the newer entries and segments in the franchise, but honestly, I just have a lot of issues with Paco Plaza's Utsupra Sikinfra. And even if I really love the concept and execution, there's just a lot of problems I'll have that I'll get into in a second. I think the setup is simple and wonderful. A Halloween party goes awry, it's caught on a smartphone, and it's told by the only one remaining survivor, the potential murderer. I think it's fantastic, but literally just a minute in, and the whole thing falls apart so quickly. It feels as though most of it, like I said in my VHS Halloween review, it's like a really good Spanish procedural, and they're just having a fun, muck-around little found footage episode. But even then, I just don't like the POV switch. It just doesn't feel right in this franchise. I know that Paco Plaza basically helped kick off the second wave of found footage with Wreck, but I do have like a lot of general problems with this. I think that there's a few minor things he could have done, like keeping the camera horizontal for after the party, but vertical before the murders. Like, that could have been done. I do like the ending, and I really like the acting in this, and it feels natural, and I have no problems with that part of it, obviously. But even if the ending kind of steals a few things from other VHS segments, it's still very fun. The reason this one is so low is not because I don't like it, but really it's because I have a theory. It's basically Again, no. There's a conspiracy theories that I have that I didn't have time to get into in my VHS Halloween review, but I really wanted to put in here, mainly because I wanted to get that video out on time. But since this is over an hour long, I'm going to say this. Okay, Ut Supra's title roughly translates to As Above, So Below. It's the Latin version of the same title of the movie by John Eric Dowdle. Now, Dowdle is a fantastic found footage director. Even though I don't like As Above, So Below, I think he's very, very good at what he does. Now, he's done the Poughkeepsie Tapes and Quarantine. Quarantine, if you didn't know, is based on Paco Plaza's Spanish horror film Wreck. So, is this movie a response and almost like a fuck you to Dowdle and his team for ruining the franchise? Maybe not. Either way, I've got a lot of problems with this segment, but the acting and effects are at least great, and deep down, I just wish it was a lot better and honestly executed in more of a found footage style. But in the end, I give Ut Supra a 5 out of 10. Number 29, Tape 49 from VHS 2, written and directed by Simon Barrett. I was mixed on including all the wraparound segments on this list, but I always try to change things up when I do these reviews. And honestly, when I started watching VHS 2, I was like, you know what? This feels like a good idea, and I'm glad I did this because I wanted to put this wraparound segment in this list to just show that it is interesting and has a really, really great opening and premise and a really, really good ending. But overall, I think the acting and writing lets this down a lot. I just don't believe these two private investigators would work together. There's no chemistry. There's not even like a simple reason. Like they could just say like, hey, we make more money together, or hey, one's really good at leads and the other one's really good at this part. I just don't believe it. I do like how economical is set up. I will say, it gets right into the movie right away, and I do like that the editing and the POV switches kind of feels natural and actually adds to the tension of what's going to go down in this student's apartment. But I just feel like I get more out of this because it's such a great way to start VHS 2, and then it's kind of let down a little bit in the middle compared to, honestly, the other segments of VHS 2. I do think that overall, the editing and the way that the lighting and the production design gives a sense of tension and rhythm between the two characters. But I do think that I would get more out of this if it wasn't such a letdown compared to the other VHS segments. I think that there's something so viscerally gory and awful about that ending, and a lot of great, like, just really tense moments when one of the PIs is focused on the TV or when they enter the home. I think the whole female PI getting sick and the nose bleeding thing is, I think it's a weirdly an unintentional setup from VHS Viral, because that didn't happen in VHS. But anyway, it's just not the best wraparound segment, but it has its moments. I think that the atmosphere and a lot of the sound design in it is really, really great. But again, due to that lackluster kind of point in the middle and some of the weak acting, I can only give Tape 49 a 5.5 out of 10. Number 28, A Ride in the Park from VHS 2. Written by Jamie Nash and directed by Eduardo Sanchez and Greg Hell. This time, I didn't hate A Ride in the Park as much as I remembered, but I also didn't love it as much. I mean, it's not my favorite, but it's definitely not that awful. I mean, the opening dialogue sucks, and the acting from everyone is a little bit mixed because it's hard to tell with zombie acting. Also, this photo on the iPhone is very clearly the headshot of the actress who's doing the voice. Also, the dubstep music dates it so horribly. But I think the things I really like about A Ride in the Park is it's very simple, and that simplicity makes it terrifying. The plot is super straightforward, and honestly, I just love it for that. A biker straps a GoPro to his helmet for a scenic ride, but then when he stops for a bloodied woman, he quickly realizes, as much as the audience, that we're at the start of a zombie apocalypse. There's no reasoning, there's no explanation, you just go right into it. And I have to say, I really appreciate that about this segment. I also appreciate the gore, I appreciate the practical effects. I think it's disgusting and almost like a fantastic classic 1960s, 70s B-movie way, even down to like the Monty Python-esque vomiting on blood. It really drags a little bit in the middle to honestly kind of build some of the tension and show how quickly it takes people to turn undead. I think when the POV moves from the cyclist to the other bikers, I think it still ramps up enough to keep watching. I really do love the final sequence of the barbecue because I think that is worth the price of admission alone. I think that the general sense of chaos and terror and fear, especially when you're just scaring the shit out of these kids, it's great. It's handled really well. The problem is I just expected more from the co-director of the Blair Witch Project, and I'm sorry about that. There's a part of me that wishes this is the opening for like a great zombie horror film, like Diary of the Dead, if it was, good. But anyway, I digress. And I give A Ride in the Park 5.5 out of 10. Number 27, To Hell and Back from VHS 99. Written and directed by Vanessa and Joseph Winter. I've been a huge fan of Vanessa and Joseph Winter ever since I saw Deadstream on Shudder, and all I can say is that I think To Hell and Back is a wonderful representation of their talents as writers, directors, and as just general horror meisters, but in my opinion, I just don't love it. mainly because I don't think it goes far enough. I love the setup, I love the production design, I love the visual effects, I love the execution, I love the concept, but once Mabel comes on the scene, I think she's the MVP of the whole story and you can kind of discard the other guys. Again, I love the world building, I love the writing, I love the effects work, but there's just not much to latch on to beyond that. It's a weak way to end VHS 99, which isn't my favorite entry in the franchise anyway, but it's a fun little hitchhike across hell and obviously back again. I just wish we explored more of that insane world and what was going on, but maybe less is more. Honestly, there's not heaps of I can say about it beyond that, and I give To Hell and Back a 6 out of 10. Number 26, Parallel Monsters from VHS Viral. Written and directed by Nacho Vigalondo. And here it is, the highest entry from VHS Viral, and you were expecting this as much as I was. I love Nacho Vigalondo and pretty much every single film he's made, and while I don't love this entry in the franchise, I think Parallel Monsters is a great example of the potential that VHS brings even in their worst entries. I do love the simple premise of a scientist opening a portal to another universe, and he meets himself doing the same thing at the same time. The only difference is that his universe is beyond fucking insane. The world building and the acting and the writing is so good. I think there are like little subtle lines and little moments that I think that is just fantastic. The only reason I can't put it simply higher is because I think the opening and ending drags a little bit. I would say that the reason this entry is so high is simply because of how good the effects are. And yes, my general bias towards Nacho's work, but I digress. I give Parallel Monsters a 6 out of 10. Number 25, Coochie Coochie Coo. Written and directed by Anna Zlokovic. Coochie Coochie Coo is a really great segment let down by some really odd directing choices, some rough acting, and some very horrible creative missteps, which, look, let me get this out of the way. I do genuinely think that this image is AI and honestly could have fixed it in post-production like once even the film was hitting the festival circuit. I don't understand why they did it. It's a real late night with the devil situation where I love this and I love the premise and I love how horrible and great it is, but at the end of the day, fuck AI and fuck anybody who uses it for this kind of filmmaking. That being said, I do like the setup and the metaphor behind Coochie, mainly because I don't see a lot of horror films or even horror shorts take on the negative impacts of fourth wave feminism and the modern infantilization of women in general, as well as feminine culture. I talked more about this in my VHS Halloween review, but I do appreciate that Anna Zlokovic really took some swings here and still made something truly terrifying, but also weirdly like gross and uncomfortable and trying to say something. It obviously loses points for being very similar to a lot of Zach Krieger's work. There's a lot of what I genuinely believe are similarities to both Weapons, which I think is unintentional, and Barbarian, which, look, I don't want to say that the next crop of horror filmmakers are going to be heavily influenced by Krieger, but I think this plus the use of AI is unfortunate. But what it has to say about American culture is both refreshing, if a little bit loose. I do want to praise Anna for doing something that works visually and has a strong execution and a vision, but the writing and the direction and obviously these creative decisions are not the best. I give Coochie Coochie Coo a 6.5 out of 10. It is weird to say that. It is genuinely weird. Number 24, Suicide Bid from VHS 99. Written and directed by Johannes Roberts. I just didn't love Suicide Bid as much as I did when I first reviewed this all those years ago. I was flip-flopping between this and Gorka's as the best segment for VHS 99, but I think where it falls apart for me is with some of the writing, acting, and a little bit of the production design in the opening segment, as well as at the gravesite. I really do love the setup of a hazing ritual going wrong. I get like the vibe of the faculty, cruel intentions, or teaching Miss Tingle. I think that's where it fits so well with VHS 99. Once we get inside the coffin, I do have to ask, would this segment just genuinely be better without the supernatural elements? I think the whole buried alive thing is scary in itself, and while the jump scare at the end and the little final reveal is horrifying enough, I think it's very, very satisfying and very well done. I think if you amped up the supernatural element and just let this depraved nihilism play out, that it would honestly be a better segment. What is more terrifying than a bunch of girls who try to do something silly and fun and terrible, but end up actually killing someone and then having that pure dread over the top of them? But then again, I guess you kind of can't do this little part at the end. Anyway, I love the ending. I love the coffin stuff. I really love Suicide Bid, and I'm giving it a 6.5 out of 10. Number 23, Tape 56 from VHS. Written by Adam Wingard and Simon Barrett, and directed by Adam Wingard. Is this the best thing Adam Wingard has ever directed? I kid. But honestly, Tape 56 is such a perfect introduction to the entire VHS franchise. It's the bleakest wraparound segment in the entire series, but it starts with someone filming a sex tape and then a group of guys assaulting a woman and then breaking into a house, and it really just sets the tone and energy that this whole series thrives on moving forward. From the rough editing to the shitty white balance to the despicable and horrible acts these guys do, like shocking a woman and just breaking glass for no reason, it's what the series is made for. Purely chaotic vibes that lead down a path into the dark heart of man. This series and the anthology itself is thrived on this kind of philosophy, essentially. It's about what people ultimately want to see, some fucked up shit caught on video. On top of that, it's really great in terms of setting the tone and mood in the middle by priming you purely for something terrifying and also feeling like you stumbled upon this tape made by a bunch of delinquents who all very clearly hate each other. I love that there is such a horrifying camaraderie between them and how much they don't like each other that it's great. I think it feels realistic. The moments later on in the house are genuinely tense, and even though I don't like the sound design much, I especially love this moment I love how they set up the franchise itself, even if it's no longer really about finding lost videotapes. It pulls you into a world that even if you don't really know exists, is still fascinating. It's very disturbing, and Tape 56 is genuinely so good. It's purely, awfully authentic in its execution, and honestly, the only reason it's not higher on the list is because how much it drags on at the start and a little bit at the end. And I give Tape 56 a 6.5 out of 10. Number 22, Second Honeymoon from VHS. Written and directed by Ty West. Why aren't there more road trips in the VHS franchise? I feel like there's 2 in the first one, and then, anyway. There are a ripe sense of menace and depression and just being stuck with people that I think, honestly, an anthology series like this could benefit from. Weirdly, they're referenced in a bunch of the first 2 series, but Second Honeymoon really sets the bar so high that maybe no one wants to try and top it. Ty West, as you may know, may be obviously known most for the most interesting horror trilogy of the 21st century, but back in 2012, Second Honeymoon was truly what introduced so many people to West's work and paved the way for a new voice in horror. But honestly, Second Honeymoon may be one of his scariest works. I never really liked The Sacrament, and I don't like Maxine, and I thought X was a little bit lackluster, but Second Honeymoon kind of still chills me after all this time, mainly because I just think it plays out so normal and then has such a great bait and switch ending. The setup of a couple on a road trip essentially being stalked by a random woman through Arizona is played so well and is a slow burn and worthy for that tension it builds. It earns its ending, which is something I can't say for most of the segments below this one. Each night gets progressively worse. It reminds me so much of the Blair Witch Project, and we see how Sam and Stephanie are acting so uncomfortable towards each other that even before things get dangerous, you kind of feel like that it's going to end awful for them even without this third party. I still hate the sound of them getting into a fight, but only because it's broken up from that banging door. It just feels too real. I don't know how Ty got that sound of such a shitty motel door right, and it's honestly a solid jump scare without being too ridiculous. The only thing that lets the segment down is how poorly written the backstory of Sam and Stephanie are. I get that they're on the rocks, and I get that it's called Second Honeymoon, but I want them fighting more. Maybe they left it on the cutting room floor, but there's just so much unsaid about the relationship that maybe that's for the better. There is this single line here.
I have no idea what you could possibly be imagining right now.
Well, it wouldn't be the first time.
But there's not really heaps to signal how bad their relationship is, except for, I guess, some of the acting. I do think that the girl who is clearly enamored with Stephanie creates a complication, even if it's a plot twist, but I wish there were more signs that this relationship was just falling apart by the seams. Either way, I still really like Second Honeymoon and its desolate setting and its desolate relationship, the lighting and the acting and how it makes every scene such a wonderful example of what heterobanality completely is and how unhappy it is. But you know what? Good for them. And with all that, I give Second Honeymoon a 6.5 out of 10. Number 21, God of Death from VHS 85, written and directed by Gigi Sol Guerrero. I still don't know how to feel about God of Death beyond the fact that it's a really well shot, edited, and acted segment. God of Death overall has such a wonderful sense of world building, setup, payoff, humor, and a really wonderful use of era-specific lighting, cameras, and makeup, but I just feel weird about the fact that this really happened, even if it didn't play out in the way. It's definitely incredible and fun and brilliant, even if I don't love the ending heaps. I still think it's about Gigi Sol Guerrero exploring and dealing with this tragedy. I think all great horror is both cathartic and a way for us to process things we don't really understand or can barely comprehend, and I think this does that very well. Going all the way back to the traditions of Lovecraft and Bram Stoker and Mary Shelley, I think maybe Guerrero is processing something that maybe I can't really get, and that's okay. I still enjoy it. I think overall God of Death is well put together, and while I don't love it at the end of the day, I still think it's really, really good. And I give God of Death a 6.5 out of 10. Whew! Woo! That was crazy. Well, we're only at number 20, basically just halfway through, and thanks for making it this far. I know this is a very long video, but hey, thanks for hearing me out on a lot of these terrible takes. If you think I've absolutely been wrong for any of the bottom segments, you can call me an asshat in the comments. You can just write asshat. Just write asshat down, ASSHAT. And with that being written, let's get on to the next 20. Number 20, Gawkers from VHS 99. Written by Tyler McIntyre and Chris Lee Hill, and directed by Tyler McIntyre. Gawkers is the best VHS 99 segment. Gawkers is the best VHS 99 segment because it understands the assignment and executed with such a gleeful delight and adolescent stupidity that I can't help but give it a positive review. I think taking something like American Pie and merging it with a really good fucked up episode of Buffy is something to behold and something very, very 1999. It's shocking that something like this wasn't made 2 decades ago. Also, while I don't love the writing or the acting, and I think the premise and the ending are honestly pure VHS fodder, it makes me feel like it's a classic from an EC Comics in the same way that The Empty Wake does. I think the main thing about Gawkers is that VHS 99 is not a super great entry. The Gawkers has a great wraparound segment and a strong overall vibe that propels this a lot higher than most others, just because it's honestly a guilty pleasure, and I think it's done with a very strong tongue-in-cheek. Sadly, this is obviously the highest segment for VHS 99, and while I don't think the visual effects are perfect, I still think that they're great for the time, and I give Gawkers a 6.5 out of 10. Number 19, Dream Girl from VHS Beyond, written and directed by Virat Pal and Evan Dixon. How is it possible that VHS did a far better story about the paparazzi than Black Mirror even tried to do? I think Dream Girl is an underrated segment, and I really appreciate how such a super simple setup of 2 paparazzis trying to infiltrate a film set, getting caught, and then getting a shot with the lead actress until, well, you know how things go. It's a gory and fascinating segment that never feels out of place in VHS Beyond, and I think the main thing about it, Dream Girl is a solid premise, even though I have like a few minor issues with it. There's a little bit of few weird things with the editing and the POV shift, but I still think that there's a love for Bollywood, cinema, filmmaking, and horror in general that comes through with every second of the short, and it's why it crosses so many international boundaries. It's not perfect by any means, but I think it's a short taking on stan culture, how women are stalked in the Bollywood industry. But honestly, I think that it's such a great segment overall because I think that the acting and effects work really puts it over the top. I will say I'm obviously a little bit biased because Virat did reach out to me on one of my previous videos, and he's a super nice dude. We've emailed back and forth, but ultimately, while I think Dream Girl is not perfect, I still think it's a pretty good segment, and I think it's a great introduction to Indian horror. I kind of wish there was a VHS for Indian horror. I'd probably watch the shit out of that. Anyway, I think with all that being said, I really hope that VHS continues to give international directors more of a chance to make what they want, and I give Dream Girl a 7 out of 10. Number 18, The Sick Thing That Happened to Emily When She Was Younger from VHS. Written by Simon Barrett and directed by Joe Swanberg. The Sick Thing That Happened, I'm not going to say the whole thing because let's just call it The Sick Thing. The Sick Thing has such a great premise and such a strong execution that even if the scares still don't feel fresh after all these years, I think there's something about how this was so ahead of its time that it still haunts me. One of my favorite things about this whole segment is that it's better than most screen life shorts and films, and especially one of my favorite things is the fact that they commit to the light on the actors' faces when it's reflected from the screen. I think that there's something that's so visceral about that you feel as a viewer, or at least I feel, that it's just something I wish more screen life films did. So I just think it's something that I wish they paid attention to. I think the practical effects in this are absolutely and intentionally cringe-inducing. I think Helen Rogers as Emily is absolutely fantastic. I think Daniel Kaufman as the manipulative James does a pretty good job balancing between helpful and horrible in his best and worst moments. The writing is a bit hit and miss in some areas and doesn't feel supernatural, but the acting, directing, and honestly some of the jump scares cover that up pretty well. The thing I don't like in the end of the day is the sound design. As Emily is gaslit more and more and her horrors are more psychological, at least she thinks there is, that it feels that there's more audible jump scares that are over the top. And I don't mean like the slamming of the door, but like I just think that they just don't make sense diegetically. The ending still kind of doesn't make heaps of sense, but I get it, and I hate to say it, I still like it. I think because of how innovative the screen life look and feel of this was and still is, I feel this is probably another guilty pleasure for me. It's a rare instance of them using glitches and poor internet in an accurate way, especially with the way that it breaks up the face, that honestly still happens now in 2025. At the end of the day, I give The Sick Thing That Happened a 7 out of 10. Number 17, The Subject from VHS 94. Written and directed by Timo Tianto. I don't know why, but The Subject just didn't hit as hard as last time. And I still really like this segment, but it's just not as good as I remember. I think there's something so disgusting and gross about how this all plays out and the horrifying creatures that Buddy Ross creates, but I just appreciate more than anything else is how vague some of it is, especially with how the tech works and how Buddy Ross's crazy acting is somehow not the most insane motherfucker in this entire entry in the VHS franchise. I do love it, but I just wish I loved it more. I think the thing that I don't like about it is how some of it feels a little bit underwritten and kind of like they were making it up on the fly. I just think it's a wonderfully horrible segment that continues to scale and escalate in a way that, honestly, I remember the first time watching this, I just was unexpecting. I just wish it was just as gory and nightmarish as Timothy Yanto's other entry in the VHS franchise, but at the end of the day, it's another great notch in his gory belt. And I gave the subject a 7 out of 10. Number 16, Storm Drain from VHS 94. Written and directed by Chloe Okuno. Storm Drain has grown on me like the fur on a rat homunculus, and I think that this segment by Okuno is amazing just because how it keeps focused on its main subject and has a brilliant sense of dread and just sheer uncertainty that only really falls apart once you see the cryptid in question. My only real complaint is that while I love the slow burn and how it's represented on screen and the building up of the folklore, I think it unravels relatively quickly once it's like, it's a cult and it's a cryptid and the cult loves the cryptid, and I just feel like it's a little bit cliche. And honestly, I kind of wish the rat creature was a little bit more terrifying. Not how it sounds. I think the audible jump scare and all that kind of stuff is fine, but I just wish it was just more gross and disgusting and sewery. I do think that the jump scare sting here is unnecessary, which is really weird considering how great the sound design is in the tunnels and creates a great terrifying atmosphere. But again, I have to hail Ratma. I think the monster work and the practical effects are amazing, but beyond the bookended chaos, I can't say too much about this other than the fact that I like this segment. I love the wraparound TV-style news reports, and I think everybody does an amazing job in this, especially Anna Hopkins as Holly Marciano, who not only kills it as this world-weary journo, but also the gross-out ending, which is just unforgettable, and the way that she ends it with a smile is so good. In fact, I have to say, the acting from literally everybody in this, including these dumb teens here, is very believable and fun, even though I don't think it would make it to air. And I give Storm Drain a 7 out of 10.
Hail Radma.
Number 15, Stowaway from VHS Beyond. Written by Mike Flanagan and directed by Kate Siegel. VHS Beyond really helped breathe new life into a franchise that could have really been dead with VHS Viral. Stowaway nails the brief but takes it in a direction that makes me so happy that people like Mike Flanagan and Kate Siegel are really helping usher forth a new generation of horror makers. Stowaway is largely kept away from cliche with a great and touching performance from YouTuber, actor, and games writer Alana Pierce, who is really out to search for the truth when it finds her in the worst way possible. I think there's something to be said about the truly terrifying cosmic horror elements of this, and it brings up this rarely explored concept in both the VHS series and horror in general, that the existence of life out there will not only be incompatible with our human lives, but also literally beyond our knowledge. Now, I don't mean that in like a xenophobic way. I just mean that we will be able to coexist, but we won't begin to comprehend one another. While a bit of a slow burn at the start, Stowaway still turns our childhood dream into an adult nightmare that it quickly turns into tragedy so fast that you may not even notice it. It has an ending not too dissimilar to many VHS segments that leaves you with a sense of dread and hollowness and emptiness that only good horror and especially cosmic horror can truly bring. Anyway, I give Stowaway a 7.5 out of 10. Number 14, Tuesday the 17th from VHS. Written and directed by Glenn McQuaid. Glenn McQuaid's Tuesday the 17th is a pastiche through and through, but having a killer who cannot be captured on film is such an inspired concept and so brilliant that I'm honestly waiting for McQuaid to make a full feature film out of this. Dripping with dumb and eventually dead teens, the short is as subtle as a rail spike through the neck, but I really appreciate that this Irish director took the time to craft something that is purely American and feels like it could have only been in the VHS franchise. I think he made it his own, but one thing I will say, excluding a few moments from the characters that I don't mind, the acting or writing feels a little bit cliched, but really still on point. Even from characters like Spider, played by Jason Yakinin, he's a little bit obnoxious, but he makes it work even if he looks like the lead singer from Your Favorite Martian. The effects, both visual effects and practical effects, are amazing, and the editing truly makes this a highly ranked segment. Even if I still don't know how they did the effects, like genuinely every single time I watch this, I'm like, this would have taken forever, especially back in the early 2010s. Also, I love the audio work. The fact that it's so glitchy and shitty. It feels like someone has borrowed a mic from a gamer from 2005. It's genuinely smart, horrifying, and who knows, maybe somebody one day will give McQuaid the budget and the time he needs to make a full feature out of this concept. Even as someone who doesn't love slashes or the deconstruction of that genre besides the Scream franchise, I think Tuesday the 17th is beyond a guilty pleasure from the VHS franchise and something that I truly, truly love. And I gave Tuesday the 17th a 7.5 out of 10. Number 13, Abduction from VHS Beyond. Written and directed by Jay Cheel. As you'll see at the end of this video, I cannot give enough praise to VHS Beyond. And this wraparound segment by Jay Cheel is one of the best parts of VHS Beyond, if not one of the better wraparound segments of the series. It is a creeping, uncomfortable, and fascinating look into an abduction case that feels not only very, very fresh, but also uses real-world examples and people to help add to its authenticity. I think it's a good trick, but honestly, it works out a lot better than expected. It's another short-form bit of genius that feels, again, like some more light cosmic horror, and while I love the world building and some of the writing and editing, the thing that ultimately lets it down is that I just don't think that the acting from some of the main people are just very good. Also, I'm not a fan of the Corridor Crew guys. I think they're super talented and provide a lot of tips for wannabe filmmakers, but that whole AI bullshit from a few years ago just rubbed me the wrong way, and I don't watch their content as much as I used to. Anyway, as spooky, scary, and as wonderful as it is, I give Abduction a 7.5 out of 10. Number 12, Amateur Night from VHS. Written by David Bruckner and Nicholas Tarkovsky, and directed by David Bruckner. Amateur Night, much like Tape 56, set the stage for how good the VHS franchise can truly be in its best moments. A simple story told from beginning to end with gory, gross, sexual, brilliant, and disturbing moments in every single way. What looks like a typical night out with Dane Cook, a tiny Ben Folds, and Dave England in 2012 turns to hell so quickly with the introduction of Lily. And as usual, shout out to Hannah Fairman for perfecting the look of Lily as the siren/succubus, because her performance from moment one is so perfect. It's not just the eyes or the hair or just how she stands or how she even just says things. It's about framing her from the beginning as this unknown or foreign entity. Even in the background here, Lily stands out, and I think that means so much, not just for her as an actor, but also for the segment as a whole. This little moment here where she moves so quickly to avoid getting touched is such a great bit of physical acting that I honestly feel like it's sped up or edited, but I think she just did that. Also, I love how Bruckner and the team added little details like the glitchy nature of the camera glasses from the beginning that honestly feels so accurate. Also, the sound of the music in the motel room, and especially during the SA scene, feels completely diegetic. The peaking audio in the bathroom as Patrick and Clint begin to panic is such a wonderful touch. These also single frames here being discolored matches the horrible way the digital frames worked at that time. It's just so good in the best and worst way possible, and I mean that in a complimentary setting. There is so much tension here that it creates a sense of reality that only these films can truly achieve at the best of times. And on top of that, the acting and writing from everybody feels so believable, down to these goofy moments of Drew Sawyer as Clint is just too real for a drunken night out, and I can feel like the existential dread he's feeling with these glasses on. The fact that these assholes never stop talking until Lily wreaks her necessary revenge is also so well played from Bruckner and the team. And goddamn, what an ending. I always love this ending that it is honestly hard to beat. Someone falling from heights is so terrifying in general, let alone how it's captured in the most believable way possible. But hey, it's mainly because I'm afraid of heights myself. Anyway, Amateur Night holds up over a decade later, and I still think it deserves to be this high up simply because every element of the Amateur Night shows directors how it should be done. It sets such a high bar for what this series can accomplish, and then some. And I give Amateur Night an 8 out of 10. Number 11, Total Copy from VHS 85. Written by Evan Dixon and directed by David Bruckner. Finally, we get to the best framing narrative in this entire franchise, and an entry that is already full of absolute bangers. The simple alien body snatcher story is taken to a whole new level with some incredible writing, acting, and production design. It makes this better than most other segments. As we learn about Rory and how he came to be and his evolution in this lab, we can only be grateful that he's contained until, obviously, sadly, he isn't. I think the thing that I love about this is that it is so camera accurate in its framing device, not just physically, but also in terms of the news program. It never loses sight how awful, gross, and weird this situation is. The double meaning of total copy is itself icing on the cake as we watch it slowly progress, with the scientists poorly handling what is truly one of the most insane cases of a close encounter of the second or first kind. While it doesn't entirely stick the landing, I think the thing that I love about it most is the tone and humor of this segment. Something I wish, honestly, more VHS franchises had and done well. I think the punchline with the aerobics tape at the beginning and end is honestly worth the price of admission alone. And I give total copy an 8 out of 10. And now we've reached our top 10, which is frankly unbelievable. But hey, honestly, just thanks for sticking around this late into the video. Also, if you're watching this far in and liked it, comment damn what a great bit of fun time we're having in the comments. And maybe give me some high points. I don't know how they work, but honestly, I'm appreciative of it. Apparently it helps getting the video in the algorithm, and apparently you can only do it on mobile. I feel like I'm asking too much. Anyway, let's get on with the top 10 in the VHS franchise. Number 10, Dream Kill from VHS 85. Written by Scott Derrickson and C. Robert Cargill, directed by Scott Derrickson. Having such a simple setup of cops receiving a series of videotaped murders days before they play out in real life is such a mind bender of a setup that I genuinely think in the hand of anyone else but Derrickson and Cargill, this would have been an absolutely garbage, confused, and disappointing entry. I think the murder sequences are absolutely the best part of it and a great adaptation of the already terrifying work that Derrickson and Cargill were able to accomplish in the original Sinister. The music and sound design is horrifying in every single way possible, and the POV is something that will stick in your mind for days on end and haunt your nightmares. I love this to death, and I love how it's not even the most frightening part of the whole premise. While I have some minor issues with the acting and some of the changing POV stuff, at least it kind of makes sense in world. I think Dream Kill is a creative, amazing, and fascinating concept that is executed really well up until, I will say, probably the last minute. The setup is nightmarish enough, and honestly, they could turn this into a total feature one day if given a bigger budget. And I give Dream Kill an 8 out of 10. Number 9, Slumber Party Alien Abduction from VHS 2. Written and directed by Jason Eisner and John Davies. Slumber Party is still a classic, even if it's not the best in a franchise entry that has absolutely some of the best moments in all of VHS history. I really do love that it takes place after Safe Haven, and I've always wondered if that ended VHS 2 instead of this, if I would feel different about that entry. But anyway, the thing that I appreciate from Eisner and Davies is that this is a long, slow burn with so many subtle moments, and that it's such a comfortable reset after the absolute reckless nature of Safe Haven that I think it was such a genius way to put this at the end of VHS 2, because it leaves you with such a horrible, sick feeling inside you that honestly it still terrifies me with how everything is handled in this segment. Like I mentioned previously, I don't do well with alien footage or alien abductions, and maybe one day I'll explain specifically why and what caused that. But this is such a great segment and feels so authentically awful all at the same time, not just for the human and adult characters, but also these young teens as well. The first half of the segment has so much youthful chaos that balances teen pranks, and how I just love how it transitions into this full-blown horror in just a matter of seconds, and such a beautiful bit of sound design that I think it's just so wonderfully unique, and I think it's resonated with a lot of people for that exact reason. I think the alien design is so simple and so well done. The fact that they are just absolutely there to destroy and fuck with humans is terrifying in itself. I actually like to imagine that the aliens themselves are just like the kids, like they're 10 or 11 years old in their universe, and they're zipping around the galaxy just causing all of this infantile chaos, just messing around with what their version of a sleepover would be. Except, you know, they kill like heaps of people and obviously give adults like me nightmares. The only negative thing I have to say is I just don't like the dialogue, and some of the acting from the older characters just feels off and inauthentic. But anyway, they're relatively young actors. I don't want to fault them on that. They give their best with what they do, especially when the aliens attack. It feels realistic. It feels terrifying. On top of that, I think this might have the worst ending of any segment in this franchise. It's so awful and heartbreaking in so many ways. I still think it fits the VHS franchise in the best way possible, and as a final segment of VHS 2, it really leaves you with a pit in your stomach that you won't be able to get rid of for hours on end. And I give Slumber Party an 8 out of 10. Number 8, Home Haunt from VHS Halloween. Written and directed by Mechlin Pitt Norman and R.H. Norman. For anyone who watched my VHS Halloween review, you already know how I feel about Mechlin and A.R.H. Norman's touching father and son horror short. It's great. It's really just great. And look, call it recency bias, but putting it this high up was really easy for me. The simple setup of a haunted house going awry and was getting tiring by the time we reached the hour mark in VHS Halloween, but this surprised me in so many different ways that I just felt nothing but glee by the end of it. Home Haunt works mainly because I think the writing, acting, and honestly the relationship dynamic with the family just adds a neat little layer that weirdly works for a VHS segment and adds something so neat and refreshing that it could honestly seem a little bit cliche if done with the wrong actors or the wrong writers. The Normans create a fun little tone and go down such a brilliant and hilarious gory route that it's almost impossible not to feel so joyous at the end of it. Also want to give a shout out to Jeff Harms as Keith, who absolutely kills it as this pathetic dad, and Rick Baker, the effects legend, turning into I Think You Should Leave character the minute he's on screen is so funny and makes me wish he didn't die so quickly. He's just a legend. He really is. Home Haunt is going to go down as an underrated entry in the series in future years to come. I guarantee it. And I give Home Haunt an 8.5 out of 10. Number 7, No Wake and Ambrosia from VHS 85, written and directed by Mike P. Nelson. I know this was originally split into 2 parts, but bringing them together, the writer-director Mike P. Nelson created something that I honestly feel as though could not be done in anything else but the VHS franchise. No Wake is obviously about a bunch of friends who get stranded on a boat and get hunted by a mysterious killer, and Ambrosia reveals that killer's bizarre family and their coming-of-age ritual, done in a way that makes it feel so uncomfortable and so real that once you start to put the pieces together and realize what's happening, it feels already too late. Together, they present a found-footage story like no other, and I think that having these 2 dovetailed stories from 2 different nightmarish perspectives honestly make up a fantastic story and something that makes VHS 85 truly unique. I think that there is so much in here from the writing, the acting, the makeup effects, the sound design. So much of this is so wonderful. Like I said in my original 85 review, Anna Sundberg and Evie Bear are stars in the making, and I really hope somebody casts these 2 in something bigger, greater, and maybe even something more ridiculous in the future. I'm also so glad that someone like Nelson is working on the new Silent Night, Deadly Night remake, and apparently he just made a Jason Voorhees short. That's good. He is a net positive for horror in general. The man has creative chops and then some, and I give No Wake and Ambrosia an 8.5 out of 10. Number 6, Kid Print from VHS Halloween, written and directed by Alex Ross Perry. Kid Print is a wonderfully sick, multi-layered nightmare that has honestly one of the most despicable villains in all of VHS history. While people have had very mixed feelings about Kid Print, I think Alex Ross Perry sets up such a wonderful slow burn that keeps rising in tension constantly until it honestly boils over and explodes. The pressure in that final act is so immense, and while some people said that they saw it coming, I did not, and I still loved rewatching this. I already knew Alex Ross Perry was a phenomenally talented writer and director, but see him tackle a horror film, a genre I don't think he's really dabbled in that much. He does it in such a way that is both viscerally and visually disturbing, and yet is so period accurate that I cannot get over the fact that it's just such a horrible concept and idea executed absolutely perfectly. MVP of the whole segment obviously goes to Carl William Garrison as Bruce Dittman, who is so unassuming and horrible that I really did think for a long time that the dad Tim was going to be the one kidnapping kids until, obviously, when the curtain drops. Call it recency bias again if you want, but Kid Print may go down as one of the series' most twisted segments for years to come, and I give this one a 9 out of 10. Number 5, The Empty Wake from VHS 94, written and directed by Simon Barrett. I love how old school The Empty Wake is, and yet how modern it feels. I think aesthetically it fits VHS 94 so perfectly, but I think the thing about The Empty Wake I love more than anything else is that it feels truly timeless. You could throw this on and not even explain that it's a part of the VHS franchise, and let it play out like an old episode of The Twilight Zone or Tales from the Crypt, or even something from The Outer Limits, and I still would say it hits hard for any audience. I think everyone here's acting is wonderfully subtle and wonderfully done. It's very believable. The writing is drip-fed. It makes you feel as though everything that's happening is going to be just creepy enough for you to totally get behind until it lures you into the over-the-top schlock that it ends with. On top of that, the addition of it being a dark and stormy night and having it play into the ending of this whole nightmare playing out in pretty much real time, it feels as though it is almost unending, that you are stuck in this room, in this storm, on this night, with a wonderful way it plays out and effectively uses the production design. I feel like The Empty Wake is a pure horror short story come to life in all of the best ways possible, and I give it a 9 out of 10. Number 4, 10/31/98 from VHS. Written and directed by Radio Silence. Alright, it's that time. This is the highest entry from the original VHS, and I still think it's one of the best. The Scream Kings that are Radio Silence still makes this nightmare work, and then some. For people who don't know, on Halloween in 1998, some friends capture a night that they'll absolutely never forget. And while the beginning, middle, and end ramps up nice and gently, it has one of the best final moments in any VHS segment. I praise this segment so much over the years, I think that people are probably getting sick of the dick riding that I'm doing, but unless you're a new subscriber, you honestly cannot be surprised that it is this high on this list. I think the scares are subtle during the middle and done so well, and it makes me just so grateful that Radio Silence is killing it out there in the world. I think that the escalation, especially as they enter the house, is so natural and done so well. It never gets too cliche with the way that the camera work is handled. I really love how it feels like it's just a bunch of friends goofing off for most of it, that it's never boring and it never overstays its welcome. Especially during the house exploration, like yes, they like scare each other, but it doesn't feel mean-spirited or horrible like most of the other VHS segments. It is a haunted house, pure and simple, and I think that while the ending is deeply nihilistic, I still think it works with what this segment is trying to portray. I do have to say my only minor gripe is that yes, after all this time, the effects at the end don't look the best, but I still think it works. I think with the VHS aesthetic to it, the editing and lighting does a fantastic job, and honestly doesn't notice until you're really looking out for it. I think the setup might be a little bit cliche, but I think the little elements like the scar on the radio and the car and this joke here
Better than Unabomber.
and the intro at the barbecue really makes this feel fun, believable, and like you found this on an old tape. One thing that I really love and didn't catch until the 5th or 6th viewing is that the segment has these crows that we see at the end. They fly past at the start as if not only the house, but this video is cursed in itself. One thing that really made me truly appreciate this again was that I just saw the new Conjuring movie, and that film sucked and barely had any of the level of creativity or weird shit that apparently is haunting this house in a literally billion-dollar franchise. Anyway, 10/31/98 was such a joy to watch again. Knowing that it exists just makes me smile, even with the secret good ending. It's still one of the best. It's the OG Halloween gone wrong. It's 10/31/98, and it gets a 9 out of 10. Number 3. Live and Let Dive from VHS Beyond. Written by Ben Turner and Justin Martinez, and directed by Justin Martinez. Live and Let Dive is such a visual miracle that I am truly fascinated by it in so many different ways. It is an insane nightmare that melds modern visual effects with some classic in-camera work that, I still don't know how they did some of this stuff. Ben Turner and Justin Martinez truly made something that's not only fun and full of mayhem, but is such a terrifying concept, even without the sci-fi elements. And yes, like I mentioned before, I'm scared of aliens and heights, and melding them together does not help. I think the concept is simple enough. A bunch of skydivers prepare for an unforgettable nightmare, and then it just gets even worse when aliens are invading at the same time. I think the seamless transition between practical and digital effects is incredibly well done, especially in the last moments here. There is an absolutely insane level of work that is done on the drop and the landing, and it's something that I will watch and rewatch over and over again when I'm a little bit bored, and it just really is that good a segment that I could just kind of throw it on an afternoon when things are going a little bit slow. The only thing that lets it down is that obviously we've done the alien abduction thing before, and especially the kind of the rising car thing, and again, we've seen it before, not necessarily in the VHS franchise, but in horror films and sci-fi films in general, but I think this is more terrifying. I really love Live and Let Dive, and it gets a 9 out of 10. Number 2, Terror from VHS 94. Written and directed by Ryan Prowse. God damn it, I love Terror. Terror is such a great encapsulation of everything I could have hoped for from an anthology called VHS 94. Taking the aesthetic of early VHS horror, melding it with the politics of the time, and then having editing and effects that is so well and feels so modern, but old school just at the same time. Ryan Prowse creates such a wonderfully unique and fascinating concept that the only thing I can even mildly compare it to is the recently released Sinners, and how it takes similar themes of creatures in the night and the link to white domestic terrorism. Anyway, that's a whole other video. Terror on the surface feels so straightforward, but it's such a delicately designed puzzle box that once you figure out what's going on about 4 or 5 minutes in, especially when they blow up that rabbit, it's already too late. The film melds the nightmarish visuals of The Thing, the politics of They Live, and the dry humor of Chris Morris, and I could not be more here for it. The ending with the vampire's revenge is so visceral and wonderfully done and so funny. I fucking love it. I really do think Terror is both a message and also a brilliant satire of a movement that honestly should have died a long time ago. And it's why I give it a 9.5 out of 10. Number 1. Safe Haven from VHS 2. Written by and directed by Timo Tianto and Gareth Hugh Evans. Yep, it's just the fucking best. It really is. Safe Haven is brilliant, disturbing, fun, chaotic, a perfect slow burn from beginning to end. A fantastic horror short that does not let up for a single moment. It is a terrifying descent into hell and a long ride back to reality, which is far worse than what it was before. I must have watched this a dozen times, and again, this opening shot alone with the camera guys is such a wonderfully delicate foreshadowing for what Lena is going through that honestly, this watch, which may have been, I don't know, the 10th or 11th time I've watched this, it's the first time I noticed it. It's so subtle and so simple and so good, and God bless Gareth and Timo for doing something so brilliant. These guys have made this a memorable masterpiece in a series honestly full of incredibly memorable segments. The thing I truly love about this is that it literally takes from the last 50 years of horror, but does it in such a fun, brilliant, and unique way that I can't get over how wonderfully done it is. It makes each element so horrible in its own way. The cult pregnancy feels like it's Rosemary's Baby. The creature coming out of the chest feels like from Ridley Scott's Alien. The gory explosions feel like they're from Peter Jackson's early work and Romero's Dead series. The stringy wooden dolls are straight out of the Blair Witch Project. And the creepy, pale, black-haired and dead-eyed girls feel like they're from the rise of J-horror in the early 2000s. I think everything here works and is so satisfying to watch because they are done in such a brilliant and subtle way, up until I would say about the middle, and then it's all hell is let loose. I love how it's edited. I love all the practical effects. I love all the visual effects. I love all the creatures. I love the little moments from each single cut between inside and outside the facility. I think there's so much wrapped in this, and I think about it every couple of weeks, and especially the incredible acting chops again from Epi Kusananda, who still after all these years has this as his headshot on IMDb. It's perfect. He's a legend. Gareth and Timo are legends. I do hope to shake their hand one day. Safe Haven is a 10 out of 10. It always has been. It may always will be. And that's the end of the list. And that's it. That's every single segment from the VHS franchise as of 2025, ranked from bottom to top. And I won't be doing another one of these in 2026 or 2027 because I kind of want to take a shot at being a filmmaker in my own right, because I think I've put down a lot of shitty work over the years that I think it's my turn to make terrible things. Until then, here are my rankings for the entire series. Yes, obviously VHS 94 is at the top and VHS Viral is at the bottom. You can also follow me on Letterboxd, which is obviously the link for it is down there. I have a whole bunch of films around the spooky season that I watched and largely didn't like. It was a lot of disappointing films in this series, to be honest. And I really want to thank everybody who's watched the VHS Halloween reviews over the years. Every single one of these is such a joy to put together and to put out. And I'm so glad that I can actually film like a little bit of it just for you to really enjoy. I can't wait to talk about these segments, every single year, and especially with a new one on the horizon. As of recording this, there is nothing new that's come out about what the next VHS is going to be, but that's okay. I also really want to thank everybody who has supported me on Patreon. Thank you to all of these people. I just want to give a shout out to all these other people who have just supported me emotionally and mentally. It's been a really, really tough couple of months because I quit my job back in August to make more content, and it's going well. I don't know why that's the case, but look, I really want to thank every single person who's ever watched any of these videos. I know that like every single time I drop one of these videos, like it gets a couple thousand views, and it means a lot to me. I don't make that much money off it, and in fact, if you want to support me on Patreon, you can do that right here. Your name can be in the next video. But for now, I really want to go and make short films and maybe make more videos like this. But for now, I just want to say thank you for watching, and I hope you have a wonderful day. And I guess like and subscribe. I think that's a thing I should keep saying. Like and subscribe the channel, because I got more stuff coming out soon, and I really want to share it with you. Anyway, thanks so much. Have a great time. Have a great day. Bye-bye.